The October wind cut across the parade ground at Fort Kearny like a blade, carrying with it the scent of coming snow and the angry voices of 30-some settlers gathered in a tight circle. Sam McKenna pulled his worn coat tighter as he approached the crowd, his weathered boots crunching on the frost-hardened ground. He'd ridden in for supplies, not expecting to find half the territory's population worked up into a frenzy. "She's Apache, Major Webb!" Jake Morrison's voice rose above the others, his face flushed red beneath his scraggly beard. "Don't matter if she's just a girl. Her people killed my brother and his wife not 3 months back." Sam pushed through the crowd, his 6-foot frame parting the sea of agitated faces. At the center of the circle, Major Harrison Webb stood rigid in his blue uniform, one hand resting on his saber hilt. Behind him, pressed against the wooden steps of the fort's headquarters, cowered a small figure, wrapped in a tattered blanket. The girl couldn't have been more than 12, her dark eyes wide with terror as she stared at the hostile faces surrounding her. Dried blood caked her forehead, and her black hair hung in matted strands around her face. Sam's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, the child's frightened expression reminded him so powerfully of his own daughter, Mary, that his chest tightened with familiar grief. "The patrol found her 3 days ago," Major Webb was saying, his voice strained but steady. "She was hiding in a cave, half dead from exposure. Whatever happened to her village—" "We know what happened," shouted Martha Hendricks, the baker's wife. "Captain Reynolds and his men did what needed doing. Those savages had it coming after what they'd done to the Patterson family." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Sam noticed how the little girl flinched at each raised voice, her small hands gripping the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her lips moved silently, and he realized she was whispering something, probably a prayer in her own language. "The girl stays here until we receive orders from territorial headquarters," Major Webb declared. "I won't have it said that Fort Kearny turned away a child, regardless of her heritage." "Heritage?" Morrison spat into the dirt. "She's a snake that'll grow up to bite us. Send her west with the others, or better yet—" "That's enough." The major's hand moved to his pistol. "I'll not have talk of murder on my parade ground." Sam had heard enough. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension like a church bell. "What's wrong with you people? She's just a child." Every head turned toward him. Morrison's eyes narrowed with recognition. "Well, well, the hermit comes down from his mountain. This ain't your concern, McKenna." "Any child in need of help is my concern," Sam replied, his gray eyes fixed on the girl. She was looking at him now, something in his tone perhaps penetrating her fear. "What kind of Christians threaten a little girl?" "Christians who've buried their kin," Morrison shot back. "You've been living alone too long, McKenna. Made you soft. This little Apache princess grows up. She'll be leading war parties against our children." Sam's jaw tightened. "She's 12 years old, Morrison. What war party is she going to lead? Against what army? Look at her. She's scared to death." "Sam's right," came an unexpected voice. Martha Collins, the fort's schoolteacher, stepped forward from the crowd's edge. Her plain brown dress was dusty from travel, her bonnet slightly askew. "This child has done nothing wrong. The sins of her people, if sins they be, aren't hers to bear." The crowd's mood shifted, uncertain now. Some nodded agreement with Martha's words, while others grumbled displeasure. Major Webb seized the moment. "Mrs. Collins speaks wisdom. The girl will remain at the fort until—" "No." Morrison's voice was flat, dangerous. "We didn't come here to debate scripture with schoolmarms and hermits. That girl goes, or we'll take matters into our own hands." Several men behind Morrison nodded grimly. Sam recognized them, hardened settlers who'd lost stock, family, or friends to Apache raids. Their faces held the cold determination of men who'd made up their minds. The little girl seemed to sense the shift in mood. She pressed herself harder against the wooden steps, her dark eyes darting between the hostile faces. A small whimper escaped her lips. That sound, so much like Mary's cries during her final illness, broke something open in Sam's chest. Without thinking, he moved toward the child, his hands raised peacefully. "Easy there, little one," he said softly, kneeling a few feet away. "Nobody's going to hurt you." "Get away from her, McKenna," Morrison barked. "Don't you go getting attached to that little savage." Sam ignored him, keeping his voice gentle. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl's eyes widened. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, shaking her head frantically. "That's all right," Sam murmured. "You don't have to say anything." He looked up at Major Webb. "This child needs doctoring, food, and a safe place to heal, not a mob baying for her blood." Major Webb nodded gratefully. "Exactly what Then I'll take her," Sam announced, the words leaving his mouth before he'd fully formed the thought. The crowd fell silent. Even the October wind seemed to pause, waiting. "What did you say?" Morrison's voice was barely a whisper. Sam stood slowly, his decision crystallizing with each word. "I said I'll take her. She can stay at my ranch until this gets sorted out proper." "You've lost your mind," Morrison breathed. "That's an Apache, McKenna." "Apache, they killed your friends, your neighbors. And this little girl had nothing to do with it," Sam replied firmly. "She's a child who needs help, and I'm offering it." The girl was staring at him now, her frightened eyes searching his face as if trying to understand this tall, gruff stranger who'd spoken kindly to her. Major Webb stepped forward. "Mr. McKenna, I appreciate your offer, but the responsibility is mine to take," Sam finished. "Unless you're planning to lock her in the guardhouse like a criminal." The major's face reddened. "Of course not, but—" "Then it's settled." Sam turned to face the crowd, his voice carrying across the parade ground. "Anyone who's got a problem with my decision can take it up with me personally, but you'll leave the girl out of it." Morrison's face was twisted with rage. "You'll regret this, McKenna. Mark my words, you'll regret it." As the crowd began to disperse, muttering angrily among themselves, Sam knelt again beside the trembling child. "Come on, little one," he said gently. "Let's get you somewhere warm." For the first time since he'd arrived, the girl moved, taking a tentative step toward him. It was a small step, but it felt like the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. The major's office was thick with cigar smoke and tension. Sam sat across from Harrison Webb's desk, his hat balanced on his knee, while the Apache girl, who still hadn't spoken a word, huddled in a chair beside the pot-bellied stove. Martha Collins had found her a clean dress, though it hung loose on her small frame, and Dr. Henley had treated the cut on her forehead. Still, she watched every movement with the wariness of a cornered animal. "You understand what you're taking on, McKenna?" Major Webb leaned back in his chair, studying Sam with shrewd blue eyes. "This isn't just about providing shelter. That crowd out there, they're not going to forget what happened today." Sam nodded grimly. "I know Morrison and his friends. They'll make noise, but they won't do anything stupid. Not right away, anyway." "Don't be so sure." Webb stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the parade ground where clusters of settlers still lingered, their conversations animated and angry. "Tempers are running high. The Patterson massacre is still fresh in everyone's minds. 3 children, Sam, 3 little ones, butchered in their beds." The girl in the chair flinched at the word butchered, though she gave no other sign of understanding English. Sam noticed her reaction, filing it away. She understood more than she was letting on. "I'm not defending what happened to the Pattersons," Sam said carefully, "but this child didn't swing any tomahawks. She's a victim too, Major. Look at her." Webb turned from the window. "I am looking at her. I see a complication that could tear this community apart." He paused, then added more softly, "But I also see what you see, a scared little girl who's lost everything." "Doctor." Henley knocked and entered without waiting for permission, his medical bag in hand. "She's malnourished," he announced without preamble. "Hasn't eaten properly in days, maybe weeks, and there are old scars on her arms. Looks like she's been through considerable trauma even before whatever happened to her village." Sam felt his jaw tighten. "What kind of scars?" "Hard to say. Could be from falls, could be from rougher treatment. The Apache aren't known for coddling their children." The doctor's tone was matter-of-fact, but Sam caught the underlying assumption. "Oh," Martha Collins interjected from the doorway. "She could have been hurt in the raid itself. Children often bear the brunt of violence in these conflicts, Doctor." Henley shrugged. "Perhaps. In any case, she'll need careful feeding and monitoring. Her spirit seems fragile." As if summoned by their discussion, the girl suddenly spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ayanna." Every head turned toward her. She was looking directly at Sam, her dark eyes steady for the first time since he'd met her. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Sam leaned forward gently. "Ayanna," she repeated, touching her chest. "My name." "Ayanna." "Ayanna," Sam repeated, testing the unfamiliar syllables. "That's a beautiful name. What does it mean?" The girl's lips moved silently, as if translating in her mind. Finally she said, "Forever, flower, forever bloom." Martha Collins smiled, the first genuine smile Sam had seen all day. "How lovely. Like an eternal blossom." Major Webb cleared his throat. "Well, Miss Ayanna, Mr. McKenna here has offered to provide you with temporary shelter. Would you be comfortable with that arrangement?" Ayanna looked at Sam for a long moment, her gaze seeming to weigh and measure him. Finally, she nodded once, a small but definite gesture. Good, Webb said, though his relief was tinged with concern. Now about the terms of this arrangement. I'll need your word, McKenna, that you'll keep me informed of any developments, and if Territorial Headquarters orders her moved to a reservation, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it, Sam replied. That's not good enough. I need your word that you'll comply with official orders. Sam was quiet for a moment, his eyes on Ayanna. She was watching him intently, as if she understood that her fate hung in the balance of his next words. I give you my word that I'll do right by this child, he said finally. Whatever that means when the time comes. Webb's face darkened. Sam, that's the best I can offer, Major. Take it or leave it. The two men stared at each other across the desk. Finally, Webb nodded reluctantly. Very well, but I want reports, weekly reports on her condition and behavior, and if there's any trouble, any at all, you bring her back here immediately. Understood. Sam stood, then looked down at Ayanna. Are you ready to go, little one? She nodded and slid off the chair, moving to stand beside him. Sam was struck by how small she was, how fragile she looked, despite the obvious strength in her bearing. As they prepared to leave, Martha Collins approached with a bundle of clothing and a small satchel. Some extra dresses and a few supplies, she explained. And, she hesitated, then pulled out a small, carved wooden horse. This belonged to my son. He passed 3 years ago from the fever. I thought she might like it. Sam accepted the gifts gratefully. Thank you, Martha. That's very kind. Will you bring her to school? Martha asked. When she's ready, I mean. She should learn to read and write proper English. We'll see, Sam replied, aware that such a suggestion would likely inflame the community further. As they stepped out into the October afternoon, Sam felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon them. The remaining settlers watched in hostile silence as he helped Ayanna into his wagon, their faces a mixture of disbelief and anger. Jake Morrison approached as Sam climbed into the driver's seat. You're making a mistake, McKenna. A big one. Maybe, Sam replied, picking up the reins. But it's my mistake to make. Not when it affects all of us, Morrison shot back. You're harboring the enemy, Sam. When she grows up and leads war parties against our children, their blood will be on your hands. Sam looked down at Ayanna, who was clutching Martha's wooden horse tightly to her chest. She's not the enemy, Morrison. She's just a lost child. We'll see about that, Morrison said ominously. We'll see. As Sam drove away from Fort Kearny, Ayanna sitting silently beside him, he wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Behind them, the fort grew smaller in the distance, but the weight of the community's disapproval seemed to grow heavier with each mile. The October wind picked up, bringing with it the promise of a hard winter ahead. Sam pulled his coat tighter and glanced at the girl beside him. She was staring straight ahead, her small hands gripping the wooden horse, her face set with a determination that reminded him uncomfortably of his own daughter. It's going to be all right, Ayanna, he said quietly. I promise you that. She looked up at him then, and for the first time, he saw something besides fear in her eyes. It might have been hope, or it might have been trust. Either way, it made his chest tighten with an emotion he hadn't felt in 3 long years. The responsibility of caring for another soul, especially this particular soul, settled on his shoulders like a heavy mantle. But as they rode toward his ranch in the gathering dusk, Sam found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, he was ready to carry that weight again. The first week at the McKenna ranch passed in a careful dance of adjustment. Sam's modest log cabin, which had felt spacious enough for one grieving man, suddenly seemed cramped with the addition of a traumatized child who jumped at every unexpected sound. He'd given Ayanna his daughter's old room, a decision that had taken him 3 sleepless nights to make, and moved himself to the small alcove off the kitchen where he'd stored Mary's belongings. Ayanna spoke little, but her eyes missed nothing. She watched Sam's morning routine with the cattle, observed how he mended fences and chopped wood, and seemed to catalogue every detail of his solitary existence. When he offered her food, she ate sparingly, as if afraid it might be taken away. When he spoke to her, she listened intently but rarely responded with more than a nod or a whispered yes or no. She's like a wild animal learning to trust, Sam murmured to himself on the 4th evening, watching her through the window as she sat on the porch, carefully examining Martha's wooden horse in the fading light. The isolation that had been Sam's refuge for 3 years now felt like a prison. Every trip to town for supplies became an ordeal of hostile stares and whispered conversations. The general store fell silent when he entered, and more than once he'd heard the word Apache lover muttered behind his back. On the 8th day, the first real trouble came. Sam was mending a section of fence near the creek when he heard the thunder of hoofbeats approaching. He looked up to see Jake Morrison riding hard toward the cabin, followed by 3 other men Sam recognized from the confrontation at Fort Kearny. His blood ran cold as he realized Ayanna was alone in the house. Dropping his tools, Sam ran toward the cabin, his heart pounding. He arrived to find Morrison and his men dismounted, standing in his yard with their hands resting on their gun belts. "Where is she, McKenna?" Morrison's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "Where's who?" Sam asked, though he knew perfectly well. "Don't play games, the Apache girl. We know she's here." Sam's eyes flicked toward the cabin. Through the window, he could see Ayanna's small face pressed against the glass, her dark eyes wide with terror. She'd recognized Morrison from the fort, and the fear in her expression made Sam's protective instincts flare. "What do you want, Morrison?" "Justice," replied Tom Hendricks, the baker's brother-in-law. "My sister's boy was playing near the creek yesterday when he saw that girl, saw her doing things." "What kind of things?" Sam's voice was dangerously quiet. "Heathen things," Morrison spat, "dancing around, chanting in that savage tongue, probably calling down curses on good Christian folk." Sam almost laughed at the absurdity. "She's 12 years old, Morrison. She was probably just playing." "Playing?" Morrison's face reddened. "That's what you call it? We've got children in this county, McKenna. Children who are scared to sleep at night because there's an Apache living free as you please, doing devil knows what kind of rituals." "She's not doing rituals," Sam said firmly. "She's a scared little girl trying to make sense of a world that's turned upside down." "Then why won't she speak English proper?" demanded Bill Crawford, a rancher whose spread bordered Sam's property. "Why's she always muttering in that Indian talk?" "Maybe because she's afraid," Sam replied, his patience wearing thin. "Maybe because every time she sees a white face, she remembers what happened to her family." Morrison stepped forward, his hand moving to his pistol. "Her family were murderers, McKenna, killers and thieves, and she's no different, no matter how young she is." "That's enough." Sam's voice carried the authority of a man who'd spent years alone, with nothing but his thoughts and his grief. "Get off my land, Morrison. All of you. We're not going anywhere until you hand over that girl," Morrison declared. "The territorial marshal's on his way from Omaha. He'll be here within the week, and when he arrives, he's going to take her to the reservation where she belongs, but we're not waiting that long." Sam's blood ran cold. "What marshal?" Morrison smiled coldly. "The one I wired about the situation. Seems there's been complaints about an Apache child living free among white settlers, complaints about the safety of our children." "You had no right." "I had every right." Morrison's voice rose to a shout. "This is our community, McKenna, and we won't have it poisoned by your misguided charity." The cabin door opened, and Ayanna stepped out onto the porch. She was wearing one of the dresses Martha had given her, but her small hands were clenched into fists at her sides. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "I am not poison," she said in careful English. "I am Ayanna. I was daughter of Nalnish, who was a good man. He taught me to help, not hurt." Morrison's face twisted with contempt. "Listen to her, McKenna, already spreading lies about her murdering father." "How do you know her father was a murderer?" Sam demanded. "Because he was Apache," Morrison shot back. "That's all I need to know." Ayanna's composure cracked. Tears began streaming down her face, but she didn't back down. "My father healed horses," she said, her voice breaking. "He made beautiful things from leather. He never hurt anyone. The soldiers came and—" She couldn't finish, but she didn't need to. The pain in her voice was eloquent enough. Sam moved to stand between Morrison and the girl. "You've made your point, Morrison. Now get off my land before I make you leave." "You threatening me, McKenna?" "I'm stating a fact." Sam's hand moved to his own gun. "This is my property, and that girl is under my protection. Anyone who wants to harm her will have to go through me first." The tension stretched taut as a wire. Morrison's men shifted nervously, their hands hovering near their weapons. Finally, Morrison spat in the dirt and remounted his horse. "This isn't over, McKenna. That marshal will be here soon, and when he takes her away, you'll see what your charity has bought you. You'll see how the community treats Apache lovers." As they rode away, Sam felt Ayanna's small hand slip into his. She was still crying, but her grip was firm. "Are they going to take me away?" she whispered. Sam looked down at her tear-stained face, seeing not an Apache child, but simply a frightened girl who'd lost everything. "Not if I can help it," he said quietly. But even as he spoke the words, he wondered if he was making a promise he wouldn't be able to keep. The territorial marshal would have the law on his side, and Sam was just one man against an entire community's prejudice. That night, As he sat by the fire cleaning his rifle, Sam caught Ayana watching him from the doorway to her room. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly. Sam considered lying, then decided she deserved the truth. "Yes," he said, "but being afraid doesn't mean giving up. Sometimes being afraid means you're fighting for something worth fighting for." She nodded solemnly, then disappeared back into her room. But an hour later, when Sam checked on her, he found her sitting by the window, Martha's wooden horse in her lap, keeping watch over the dark prairie like a small sentinel. The struggle for Ayana's future was just beginning, and Sam knew the hardest battles still lay ahead. The territorial marshal arrived on a Tuesday morning with the first snow of winter, his black coat stark against the white landscape. Sam watched from his porch as the rider approached, Ayana pressed close to his side, her small hand gripping his sleeve. Behind the marshal, at a respectful distance, rode Jake Morrison and a delegation of townspeople, their faces grim with satisfaction. Marshal Thomas Garrett was a lean man with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much frontier justice. He dismounted with the deliberate movements of someone accustomed to being the final word in disputes, his badge glinting in the pale morning light. "Samuel McKenna." His voice carried the authority of territorial law. "That's me," Sam replied, not moving from the porch. "I'm Marshal Garrett. I understand you've been harboring an Apache child, contrary to territorial policy, regarding the placement of Indian minors." Sam felt Ayana tremble beside him. "I've been caring for a child in need," he corrected. "Nothing contrary about that." Garrett's eyes shifted to Ayana, and Sam was surprised to see something like sympathy flicker across his weathered features. "Miss, what's your name?" "Ayana," she whispered, then added more boldly, "Ayana McKenna." The marshal raised an eyebrow. "McKenna, you formally adopted this child?" "She's my daughter," Sam said simply. "In every way that matters." Morrison spurred his horse forward. "Marshal, you can't seriously consider—" "I'll handle this, Morrison," Garrett cut him off sharply. "Mr. McKenna, you understand that territorial law requires Indian children to be placed in designated institutions or reservations for their own protection and proper education." "Whose protection?" Sam asked. "Hers or theirs?" He nodded toward the group of settlers. "The law doesn't distinguish," Garrett replied. "I have orders to escort this child to the Pine Ridge Agency in South Dakota. She'll be well cared for there." "She's well cared for here," Sam said firmly. "She's learning English, she's healthy, and she's safe." "Safe?" Morrison's voice rose. "She's a danger to every child in this county. Just yesterday, the widow Patterson's boy came running home, saying he saw her talking to spirits by the creek." Ayana's face flushed with anger. "I was not talking to spirits. I was saying goodbye to my mother and father. It is Apache way to honor the dead." "See?" Morrison pointed accusingly. "Heathen rituals, devil worship." "It's called grief," Sam said coldly. "Something you might understand if you had a heart." The marshal held up his hand for silence. "The point is, Mr. McKenna, that this child's presence is causing unrest in the community. The territorial government has a responsibility to maintain peace." "And what about their responsibility to protect a child?" Sam demanded. "What about justice?" "Justice?" Morrison laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about justice? Where was justice for the Patterson family? For my brother? For all the good people killed by her savage kin?" "Her savage kin?" Sam's voice was dangerous now. "Marshal, this child watched her family butchered by our soldiers. She's the victim here, not the aggressor." Garrett studied Sam for a long moment. "You seem like a decent man, McKenna, but the law is the law. I'm sorry." He stepped toward the porch, and Sam moved to block his path. "She's not going anywhere." "Mr. McKenna," Garrett said patiently, "don't make this harder than it needs to be. I have my orders." "And I have my daughter," Sam replied. "No one's taking her without a fight." The marshal's hand moved to his gun. "I'd prefer not to use force, but I will if necessary." Sam was about to respond when a commotion erupted from the direction of town. A rider was approaching at full gallop, his horse lathered with sweat. As he drew closer, Sam recognized Dr. Henley from the fort. "Marshal!" Henley called out as he reined in his horse. "Thank God you're still here." "What is it, Doctor?" Garrett asked. "Diphtheria," Henley panted. "There's been an outbreak at the fort. We've lost 3 children already, and more are sick. We need help. Someone who knows about healing." Morrison scoffed. "What's that got to do with—" "The Apache girl," Henley interrupted. "Major Webb sent me to fetch her. Her father was known as a skilled healer among his people. She might know remedies we don't." All eyes turned to Ayana. She was staring at Dr. Henley with wide eyes, her mind clearly working. Finally, she spoke. "My father taught me about the white throat sickness. There is a plant, a root that can help, but it grows only in certain places and it must be prepared correctly." "You see?" Morrison said triumphantly. "Witchcraft, devil's medicine." "Medicine is medicine," Dr. Henley snapped. "I've seen frontier remedies work when traditional treatments fail. If this child can help save lives..." Marshal Garrett looked conflicted. "Doctor, you're asking me to delay the execution of territorial orders based on folk remedies." "I'm asking you to let a child help save other children," Henley replied. "Can your orders wait a few days?" Sam seized the moment. "Marshal, if Ayanna helps save lives at the fort, maybe people will see her for what she really is. A healer, not a threat." "And if her heathen potions kill more children?" Morrison demanded. "Then I'll personally escort her to the reservation," Sam said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "But if she saves lives, then she's proven her worth to this community." Ayanna tugged at Sam's sleeve. "Papa Sam," she whispered, using the name she'd started calling him in private. "I want to help. My father would want me to help." The marshal was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. "3 days," he said. "If the epidemic is contained and lives are saved, I'll reconsider my orders. But if there's any sign of irregularities, the child comes with me immediately." "Agreed," Sam said quickly, before Morrison could object. As the group prepared to ride to the fort, Ayanna ran back into the cabin. She emerged moments later, carrying a small leather pouch that Sam had never seen before. "What's in there?" he asked gently. "Seeds," she said simply. "My father gave them to me before the soldiers came. He said they were for helping people." Sam felt his chest tighten with emotion. This child, his daughter, had been carrying the tools of healing all along, waiting for a chance to honor her father's memory by saving lives. As they rode toward Fort Kearny, Sam prayed that Ayanna's knowledge would be enough to save not just the sick children, but her own future as well. The reckoning had begun, and everything depended on the wisdom of a 12-year-old Apache girl who had already lost everything once. The snow began to fall harder as they rode, and Sam couldn't help but think it felt like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The fort's infirmary had become a place of desperate hope and quiet anguish. 6 children lay on makeshift beds, their breathing labored, their small faces flushed with fever. Parents took turns keeping vigil, their eyes red from sleepless nights and tears. The acrid smell of carbolic acid couldn't mask the underlying scent of sickness and fear. Ayanna moved among the beds like a small ghost, her dark eyes taking in every detail. She'd been silent since arriving 3 hours ago, studying each child with an intensity that made some parents uncomfortable. Dr. Henley hovered nearby, watching her every move, while Sam stood guard by the door, knowing that Morrison and his supporters were gathering outside. "The white root grows by water," Ayanna finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, "near stones where the earth is dark, but it must be gathered at sunrise when the dew is heavy." "I know the place," said Martha Collins, who had arrived with blankets and fresh water, "by Miller's Creek, where the willows grow thick." "It's dangerous going," Dr. Henley warned. "That's Apache territory. The patrol only cleared it yesterday." Sam stepped forward. "I'll go with her. We can be there and back before full daylight." "No," Ayanna said firmly, surprising them all. "The spirits of my people. They will not trust if white men come to take from their sacred places. I must go alone." "Absolutely not," Sam said, his voice brooking no argument. "You're not going into Apache territory by yourself." Ayanna looked up at him, her dark eyes steady. "Papa Sam, my people are not there anymore. The soldiers, they made sure of that. But the plants remember. They will know I am Nalnish's daughter." The use of her Apache name for her father sent a chill through the room. Major Webb, who had been standing silently in the corner, cleared his throat. "Miss Ayanna, I cannot allow a child to venture beyond the fort's protection, regardless of the circumstances. Then the sick children will die," she said simply. "The white root loses its power if it is gathered by fearful hands. My father taught me this." The room fell silent, except for the labored breathing of the sick children. In the bed nearest to them, little Tommy Patterson, the same boy who had claimed to see Ayanna talking to spirits, stirred restlessly, his fever burning bright in his pale cheeks. Martha Collins knelt beside Ayanna. "Child, is there no other way? Some other medicine that might help?" Ayanna shook her head. "The white throat sickness is strong. Only the white root can fight it. But," she hesitated, then continued, "I can teach you the words to say." the way to prepare it. If someone with a good heart gathers it, someone who truly wants to heal. Sam understood immediately. I'll go. Tell me what to do. For the next hour, as dawn approached, Ayanna carefully instructed Sam in the ancient Apache ritual of gathering medicinal plants. She taught him the proper prayers, the exact way to handle the roots, how to recognize the most potent specimens. Her young voice carried the weight of generations of knowledge, and Sam found himself humbled by the depth of her understanding. Remember, she said as he prepared to leave, you must ask permission of the earth before you take. You must promise to use the medicine only for healing, and you must leave an offering, something of value to you. Sam nodded, then pulled off his wedding ring, the only thing of Mary's he still wore. This? Ayanna examined the simple gold band, then nodded solemnly. Yes, love is the strongest medicine. The earth will understand. As Sam rode out into the pre-dawn darkness, Ayanna returned to the bedside of the sick children. She began to sing softly in Apache, a healing song her father had taught her. Some of the parents shifted uncomfortably, but Martha Collins knelt beside her and took her hand. Sing for them all, child, Martha whispered. Sing them back to health. Sam returned 2 hours later with a pouch full of carefully gathered roots, his hands muddy and his clothes torn from scrambling through the creek bottom. Ayanna immediately set to work, grinding the roots with a mortar and pestle doctor Henley provided, adding water heated to a precise temperature and straining the mixture through clean cloth. How much do we give them? Dr. Henley asked. 3 drops on the tongue, every hour until the fever breaks, Ayanna replied. But the medicine must be given with hope, not fear. The children must feel that they are wanted, that they are loved. What followed were the longest 24 hours of Sam's life. The medicine was administered exactly as Ayanna prescribed, while she moved from bed to bed, singing her healing songs and placing cool cloths on fevered foreheads. Some parents initially resisted her ministrations, but as their children's breathing began to ease, opposition melted into desperate gratitude. By the second day, 3 of the children were sitting up and taking broth. By the third day, all 6 were on the road to recovery. Little Tommy Patterson was the last to improve, but when he finally opened his eyes and asked for his mother, there wasn't a dry eye in the infirmary. Marshal Garrett had remained at the fort throughout the crisis, watching everything with his shrewd gray eyes. As the children recovered, word spread throughout the territory about the Apache girl who had saved lives with her father's medicine. People who had never met Ayanna began arriving at the fort, wanting to see the little healer for themselves. On the 4th morning, as Sam sat beside Ayanna, watching Tommy Patterson take his first steps since the illness, Marshal Garrett approached them. Mr. McKenna, he said quietly, I've received new orders from territorial headquarters. Sam's blood ran cold, but the marshal held up his hand. Orders to report that the situation here has been resolved satisfactorily. It seems word of recent events reached Omaha faster than expected. The territorial governor is impressed by the peaceful resolution of a potentially inflammatory situation. What does that mean? Sam asked. It means, Garrett said with the ghost of a smile, that sometimes the law serves justice better by bending than by breaking. Miss Ayanna McKenna is to remain in your custody with the territory's blessing. Sam felt his knees go weak with relief. Ayanna looked up at him with shining eyes. Does that mean I can stay, Papa Sam? Forever, forever, Sam confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. Later that evening, as they prepared to leave the fort, Jake Morrison approached them in the gathering dusk. Sam tensed, ready for trouble, but Morrison's face held none of its usual hostility. McKenna, Morrison said awkwardly, I wanted to thank your girl. My nephew Tommy, she saved his life. She saved them all, Sam replied. Morrison nodded, then looked down at Ayanna. I'm sorry, he said simply, for the things I said, the way I acted. I was wrong. Ayanna studied his face for a moment, then nodded solemnly. Fear makes people say wrong things sometimes. My father taught me to forgive fear. As they rode home through the snow-covered landscape, Ayanna sat close to Sam on the wagon seat, Martha's wooden horse in her lap, and her father's empty medicine pouch tucked safely in her pocket. Papa Sam, she said as their cabin came into view. Yes, daughter. I think my father would be proud. I used his teachings to help instead of hurt. Sam smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the approaching fire in their hearth. I think both your fathers would be proud, Ayanna. Your Apache father for teaching you to heal, and your new father for having the privilege of watching you grow into the amazing young woman you're becoming." As they pulled into their yard, Sam saw that someone had left a basket of fresh bread and preserves on their porch. A gift from Martha Collins, no doubt, but possibly from others as well. The gesture felt like a beginning, a sign that Ayanna might finally have found not just a home, but a community willing to accept her. The wind picked up, carrying with it the promise of more snow, but Sam no longer felt the bite of isolation. He had his daughter beside him, a warm cabin waiting, and the knowledge that sometimes when people are given the chance to see past their fears, they discover that the thing they feared most might actually be exactly what they needed. "Come on, Ayanna," he said as they climbed down from the wagon. "Let's go home." And for the first time in 3 years, the word home felt complete again.